Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? All right. There was a time when you could not get even that kind of energy out of a Perl crowd this early in the morning. So I think we're all a little bit older now. Morning is not quite as scary as it used to be. So probably many fewer people who just stayed up all night, too. That used to happen for some people. So welcome to the Perl Conference. Again, here in beautiful Pittsburgh, once again for the fourth time. As was mentioned earlier, I'm Jim Brandt, president of the Perl Foundation. So we're the charitable organization that accepts donations to support things for Perl, like these conferences. So that's our involvement with this. Dan did this, but you really can't thank people enough, given that everyone who puts all this stuff together are volunteers. So I want to say thank you again to the list that Dan had, and to Dan, right? No one ever thanks Dan. So thank you, Dan, for all of your work. And all of the lists that Dan had up here before. As he said, those folks work almost all year round. There's a Slack group that they're on. They do meetings over Zoom. We have great tools now to be able to do distributed meetings and planning and things like that, but they really do. They work almost, it starts almost after the conference is over, the planning for next year. So a lot of work goes into this, so thank you to them. And also the speakers. All of the talks you're going to go to in the next couple of days, keep in mind that your speakers have put in hours and hours of time getting their slides ready, possibly right up to the actual giving of the presentation, maybe sometimes during. And all the code and all the stuff that they're going to talk about, they put a lot of time in. So thanks to all the speakers who basically provide all the content for our presentations. And as Dan said, thank you to all of our sponsors. We really can't do any of this stuff without our sponsors. They subsidize all this stuff so that we can keep the costs low for people to come. You may notice that compared to other conferences, the cost to come to a Perl conference is very low. And all of the other initiatives, everything I'm going to talk about really is supported by all of these companies and their sponsorship. So thank you again to all of the companies, please. All right, so I go to other conferences, not just Perl conferences, and one of the ones that I've gone to for the last couple of years is an organization called EDUCAUSE. They do IT, for some of you who might be in education, like universities and things like that, they do different talks around education, and they do security stuff. So I've gone to the security conference, and one of the fun things that they do is they have a theme for every year. So for all of the speakers, they ask them to kind of try to participate in the theme. 2 years ago, they were in Baltimore, which is right on the water. So of course, they did like a nautical theme. So if you can imagine a couple of days of Talk Like a Pirate Day, that's pretty much what that was all about. So, but it was fun. Everybody kind of included that in their talk descriptions, and they tried to all have, sort of that kind of stuff going on. This year, they were in Chicago, so they went with the Windy City theme, right? So the weather and things like that. And one of the talks I was looking through the schedule was tornado talks. And I thought, tornado talks, what's that about, right? So I show up, and of course they start describing things, and they're trying to go with the theme, but what they were really talking about was lightning talks, right? And almost every conference I go to, honestly, today, and I don't know if this is everyone else's experience, but this idea of lightning talks, it's such a great idea. It's just become accepted. These are just everywhere. And it actually started, when you think about the legacy of Perl, it's not just the language, it's the community. The term was coined at the second YAPC by Mark Jason Dominus. So when you think about the ways that Perl has influenced the IT world, open source, all the things that we do. I was actually, as I went to the tornado talks, I was thinking about this. I actually looked it up. You can look up the Wikipedia page. And like, there's our history. Just like it's scattered all over the place. It's not even just in people talking about Perl and the language and things like that, but things like how we do conferences and the really good ideas rise to the top. So I thought that was kind of cool that Perl still has a connection to all of these different things. So as Dan said, 20 years, absolutely amazing, still doing conferences after 20 years. And of course, that means next year, the Perl conference will be 21, so it can drink. I have not talked to Dan about what that's going to do to our insurance for next year, but we'll deal with that as we move forward. So before we talk about all the awesome stuff about today, which is what all the talks will be about, I'd like to take a little trip into what was the world like 20 years ago when all of this started at the first YAPC. So let's start off baseline. What was Perl like? The Perls that people were running, as far as I can gather at the time, were 5.0.4, which had been released a couple years earlier, so I think it was pretty widely available. I think most folks had stopped with Perl 4, although I'm sure it was still out there. I'm sure many people were still using it. And then 5.0.5 had just recently been released. And when you go back and look at the features that were added in these early releases, we don't think about it now. So many things we just take for granted, but it was things like all the module support, so that we could have shared modules to build things like CPAN. I think in 5.0.4, CGI.pm was added, and sort of spurring like all of the internet stuff that was going to happen after that. And believe it or not, Perl 6 would be announced just the next year in 2000. So that's when they would actually start thinking about that. It was a while, several years of gathering documents and things like that. But almost 20 years ago, that was already being talked about. This is what Amazon looked like 20 years ago. So Amazon was 5 years old in '99. Still mostly thought of as a bookseller at that time. I don't think anybody, I don't care who you are, would have guessed at that time that some huge portion of the IT infrastructure would be hosted on something called AWS that would also be Amazon. And arguably, almost their bigger influence, at least probably for most of the stuff that people work on in this room. Prime would not come until 2005. So we still had some time until that concept, which everyone knows about now. Supposedly a Perl shop, yeah, yep. Everybody was a Perl shop back then, right? So that was Amazon. You might recognize these. So this is what Apple was doing in 1999. I still have one of these. It still runs, which is pretty cool. And at that time, if you wanted to run Perl, Macs were running OS 9 at the time, so you had Mac Perl. And Chris Nandor is here, the Mac Perl guy. So he was one of the people involved in that project that made that possible so that people could run Perl on their Macs. The OS 10, Mac OS 10, which is what everybody knows today, which gave you Unix underneath, right? So then everybody had Perl. That wouldn't be released until 2000. So you had some time to wait. So Mac Perl was basically the way you're going to go. The iPhone would not come out until June of 2007. So it's almost unimaginable now that just didn't exist. It just wasn't around until 2007. And everybody, I think, at least I remember, all the job postings going up for app development in 2008 saying 5 years of experience required for iPhone development, right? Everybody remembers those. And you could call HR and be like, that's not possible. What do you mean? We always require 5 years, so. The iPods were 2001, so not too far off from '99. So the iPods would be coming out. This is what Google looked like. So the actual search was still in beta at that time. Way more links on the homepage. They had like some kind of mailing list or something going on. Of course, this was before they just had everyone's email, right? So they had to actually ask for it. Now they don't need to ask anymore. So all those links at the bottom, they don't need anymore. But it was barely 1 year old in '99, so they're really still just getting started. Again, amazing to think about the amount of scope of what Google does today compared to what was going on then. Also in '99, RT, Request Tracker, had the first official 1.0 release. This is what it looked like back then. So RT is also 20 years old. I work at Best Practical, so I was curious about this. But yeah, also the 20th anniversary of the official first release. There were releases before this, but this was the first official one. I have, in my professional capacity at Best Practical, I did visit a client within the past 2 years who is still running RT1 on a server. So believe it or not, and it was still fine. I basically went there to do a training. And they're like, well, we added a few features. So if you've added those features to RT since then, we might upgrade. Okay, so they were literally running 20-year-old software. So everybody was getting into this internet thing, and some of you might remember this website. There were like a top 5 scripts. How many people remember Matt's script archive? At least heard of it, right? Yeah. So yeah, for good and for bad, right? Some of the scripts, though, from this site were some of the most widely run code, literally on the entire of the early internet into the early 2000s. This stuff, people were grabbing it and running it, and it was Perl. It was the top 5 scripts were Perl scripts, where people were grabbing. It was email, scripts to send email, so the early days of spam, sadly. And then, of course, scripts when people were trying to come up with dynamic websites. So again, this is one of the first ways that a lot of people got exposed to Perl. Again, for good and bad. There was a lot of bad examples there. People came along in the subsequent years, though, and provided all sorts of better examples. So different groups got together, the early versions of London PM and other groups got together and basically rewrote all the scripts here and said, no, here's how to do it. So they did sort of follow up, but this was it. A lot of people got exposed to Perl right here. So Perl people then also were starting to get together, and this is actually what the early versions of the Perl Conference were. So Perl Conference 3 was getting planned in 99, so they'd had two before. This was the first year that they were started thinking about it being OSCON. So Linux was going to be included and a bunch of the other open source languages. So it went from being the first two Perl conferences to Perl Conference 3 plus, I think it was like LinuxCon 1. They kind of did it as like sub-conferences. I'm looking for people who I know were there to nod or be like, no, you're making this up. So far I haven't made anything up, I don't think. So you can see the list is pretty interesting. It's very close to the list of speakers who were also presenting at another conference that also got going around that time, which was the first YAPC. So this is the 20-year ago YAPC. This website is still available, by the way. One of the big benefits of the old school HTML is those files just need to sit somewhere. It's really easy to keep these websites around. So this is what it looked like, as Dan said, right here in Pittsburgh for the first 2 years. And of course, the yet another came from, obviously, Perl people love to pun, and there were a bunch of other sort of things around at the time. There was the yet another Perl, or just another Perl hacker, the JAF lines that people would include. There was the yet another compiler. So this idea of yet another was kind of a funny thing for them to do for the Perl conference. And it also turned into, this is a question we get all the time, the other name for the Perl Foundation, yet another society, which is unfortunate at times when people are looking for us and they type in Perl Foundation and it's not there, but that's where the name comes from, and that's why one of the official first, when Perl Foundation became a thing, it was yet another society, which it kind of sounds kind of clandestine, actually, when you think about it. It almost sounds like we were doing something kind of sneaky. Anyway, and maybe we were, right? So I can't talk about that, or I will be kicked out. You'll never hear from me again. So again, yeah, the websites are still there, and I've got some other links. So great stuff. Archive.org, a fantastic site. You should donate to them. A lot of this stuff, that's the only place that it's preserved. A lot of those previous screenshots, but this website is still live. You can actually just go to it and check it out. One of the interesting things actually on the site too, if you go there, the site that's still there, is Uri actually kept a diary for the conference, which is kind of interesting. So I guess it was like kind of pre-blog where everyone would have their blogs everywhere, so they just linked it right off of the site. And again, the nice thing being that it's still there, it's findable, which is kind of cool. So because it's findable, the schedule is still there, so I was able to go through and look at some of the talks. So we'll do the David Letterman style for people who know who David Letterman is. I guess we're getting to a time when you have to explain these things. But top 5 talk titles, again, I don't know what the content of all these were. I wasn't at the very first one. Perl Economics, the dismal art. This is way before economics was cool, Freakonomics and all that kind of stuff. So again, someone was thinking ahead, saw that economics would be a cool thing. Ineffective Perl programming, or idiotic Perl. So we talked about the code of conduct. Things were a little looser back then, so people called people idiots and things like that. And then presumably made slides of their Perl code and then called them idiots in public. So maybe Matt's script archive was included in there. So rebuilding post-apocalyptic civilization with Perl. So this one's kind of, I mean, it's, there's been an apocalypse, which is a little bit negative, but we're rebuilding, right? So that's a positive. So kind of, back and forth. The future begins tomorrow. So that's kind of exciting. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious, did it happen? I guess, we now know how it's going to turn out, but I don't know if it went along with whatever was in the presentation. And then finally, repent ye sinners, avoid syntax hell. Yes, people were pushing XML even in 99. They're still pushing it. They still really want us to use XML. But yeah, the JSON folks hadn't come along yet to say, no, let's mark up, let's mark up. And then for the bonus talk that I actually would love to actually see today, reducing business risk using Perl. I would love to see that talk today. So that's still, I think, a fantastic thing to talk about. So As we know, looking back, because we were here 20 years later, things continued. So the first 2 years were in Pittsburgh, and then the third year actually moved not only to a different city, but a different country. So we were at McGill University in Canada, in Montreal, which is very cool. This was the first YAPC I went to. How many people were at Montreal? A few people? So yeah. You missed that, Larry missed that one, so yeah. Really great conference. You'll start to see a theme with that logo in just a minute. And I remember, again, first one that I went to, and the first one where I kind of caught the bug of not only Perl and the language, but the community and being involved. When I just saw everything, the talks, the people, it was just fantastic. This was also my first Damien exposure. Which for all of you who've had the pleasure was just absolutely mind-blowing. I think this is the first one, so there's the handful of people who were there. I think he did Conway's Game of Life talk, which was just absolutely amazing. He had all this live code running during his presentation, which is always a scary thing. And just like my mind was blown. I think it was weeks before I thought straight again after this one. So, as I mentioned, I kind of caught the bug there. The gestation period apparently for the get involved with the Perl community bug is about 3 years, because in 2004 I ran a YAPC. So that's about when things set in. So that was in Buffalo, which again, as you can see, we did not have graphics help back then because the logo is pretty much the same. I can't even tell what the difference between the sites are. But yeah, so that was Buffalo. They've been posting, for those of you who don't follow, there's a Twitter account that they do for the conference, and they do all sorts of interesting stuff. And they did a post like about Buffalo and share your memories. And Ricardo, RGBS, shared something that I'd actually forgotten. I was very sleep deprived that week. I did not sleep at all. We did an off-site, off-conference event. We got tickets for everybody to go to an IMAX presentation of one of the Harry Potter movies. I think it was Prisoner of Azkaban. We reserved the whole theater because I knew this crowd, and I'm like, we can't just all go because everyone's going to heckle and things like that. So we got there. I think it was a midnight showing. So everybody, again, we were much more tolerant of not sleeping back then. So everyone went off, to this IMAX theater way away from the conference. Midnight showing. We had the whole theater reserved. But there were two people who showed. There's a couple that showed up, and they insisted on being allowed to see the movie. Like, they really wanted to see it at that showing. And we tried to explain to them, you're not going to enjoy this. Like, we're not going to just let you. It's not going to go the way you think. And they insisted. So they got in, and I think they might have made it about 20 minutes in before they left. And I think they gave them their money back because they were like, we told you, but they did give them their money back. So anyway, that was one of the fun things that we got from Buffalo. So. More searching, and I found my post on Slashdot, also still live, where it call for participation. And the reason I throw this one up is Slashdot, also for all of you who remember Slashdot, one of the biggest news sites for many, many years, also written in Perl. /code was the engine that drove this, and that was all Perl code. So all still up there and running. We had our own sort of Perl /dot type site, use.perl.org. And Chris and I were talking this morning. We were trying to remember, and we think it was around 2000 that use.perl.org went up. As the Perl version. So I think Chris used that as a test bed for new features, as a kind of a lower volume version of the /code, because I think once it went up on the actual, it got pounded. For people who don't remember, there was a just so you get an idea of the volume of requests that /dot used to routinely see every day. There was a thing called /dotting back then, if everybody remembers. So a story would go live on /dot and immediately crash the site that it linked to. And this was not just like one time this happened. This was a frequent thing. And I think actually, I don't know if Chris can nod back there, if they started to actually give people a little warning before they would post stuff, just so that, because it would happen so many times. So the /dot effect, exactly, yes. So.
It happened to my site.
There you go. So Larry's site was taken down by the /dot effect. So again, the legacy of Perl, that the site was written in Perl, we had our own, and again, it was one of the highest volume websites at the time. It was up there running. So the special offer, we apologize that we didn't think of this earlier, but I just thought of it as I was putting my slides together, and I've talked to a few people. We had a slot in the schedule for tomorrow, I think at 1:50, for people kind of to do your YAPC memories and things like that. But what we thought was put a different spin on it. Of the people here, there's many people here who were at the first YAPC and then also just at the first 5. So if people remember, we can, and again, the sites are live, you can go look at the topics of your talks. If people want to give a 5-minute, like a lightning talk version of the talk you gave back at one of those, we have a slot at 1:50 on Tuesday. If you can pull slides or whatever you had, that would be fantastic. I would love to see materials from there. I don't know if people can do that either on short notice or if they even exist anymore. But Tuesday at 1:40. So we have a slot in the schedule for that. So if anybody who presented at those conferences can go find, even just from your talk title, you can remember what it was that you did. We'd like to do lightning versions of that. I think that would be fun. Yes?
If somebody wanted to, how would they express interest?
How would they express interest? I don't know. Maybe Jeff could help me. He's good at putting this stuff together.
Use the lightning talk submission form.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you. So Jeff said use the lightning talk submission form. So this is like retro lightning talk, kind of. So yeah, we'll call it a modified thing. But it's got to be a talk that you gave back then. So
in the comments section, just mention that you want that session.
there we go. Yeah, in the comments section, say that yeah you're doing the retro. So all right. Let's jump ahead. Fast forward 20 years. Now that we've got. Oh, there we go.
7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
There you go.
And 2.
Nice, nice. So how many? Yeah, right. Is there a missing? Was there one missing, or no? You got them all.
There are several missing.
There are several missing. So.
Also, most of them have the European one on the back side.
Oh, nice.
I'll be switching 3 times a day.
So,
Finally.
were you in Montreal?
Yeah.
So you're a good person. Did they have a T-shirt that year? Do you remember? Because I can't find mine. Oh, I see. I don't think they did. I don't know. Okay. Fast forward 20 years. So where are we at now with Perl? Obviously, that's what we're going to talk about. All of the current stuff is this conference, but just from a high level, from a Perl level, this is the releases. The steady, constant set of new releases that have come out. I think this is absolutely fantastic and amazing. I think there are few commercial products that have had this kind of regularity. This is just the regular releases of Perl over the last 10 to 15 years. It's just a steady, predictable schedule of releases with any fixes for security things, updates, new features, Unicode support, just still one of the most stable and well-maintained languages that are out there. So I just think that this is a fantastic legacy after all this time. I love to show the CPAN mirrors. If you look at a lot of the other popular systems, most of the open source languages have something like CPAN where they share things. But there was an issue a couple of years ago with NPM, super popular repository where most people, I think all people, there was this one central repository and it went down. And people were like, we can't build our website and things like that. So some of the things that Perl folks have learned over the years, that you shouldn't have just one of something. One thing, though, I thought was interesting when I was looking at this, what's going on in Iceland? Why don't we have one there? Does anybody, there's got to be some universities or something in Iceland, right? Does anybody have any contacts in Iceland? Can we get a CPAN mirror there?
People live in Iceland and live in the center part of Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
300,000 people in the whole country.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But they have computers, right? Oh, yeah. They must have computers now. So.
They're mining Bitcoin.
Is that? I don't think hosting a CPAN mirror in Iceland probably takes a lot of resources. It could probably just run off to the side of the Bitcoin mining. So yeah. But anyway. CPAN activity, still, so you'd think after 20 years, one thing that at least occurred to me is can't we have written everything by now? But you look at the activity and yeah, you might say, well, there's a little bit of a dip, if you did a trend line, maybe a little bit down. But again, it's just new stuff going up. So there's literally thousands of module updates still going on every year and hundreds of new distributions, new stuff getting set up. So I think that level of activity is just absolutely amazing that this is all, again, new code, new things getting updated, new people getting involved. And I just talked to somebody actually at dinner last night, just set up their pause ID first time within the last 2 years. So there's still people getting involved. There's still a lot of signs of health and activity. So I think that's fantastic. Again, also the legacy of the 20 years also is just all kinds of events. It's not just code. Perl mongers and tech meetups everywhere. There's been Perl mongers groups, I think, on every continent. I know there was one in Antarctica for a while. There was a Perl guy down there, so that covered probably one of the hardest to get continents. Hundreds and hundreds of Perl conferences and workshops and all sorts of different events. Hackathons, and we've been doing these even more regularly, I think, over the last couple of years, where the core people get together just to work on one particular topic. So the QA folks, the testers who test all of CPAN, and that's, again, all of the talks that people have given about all the infrastructure around CPAN, and all sorts of different contributors getting together for these hackathons. And just an extensive catalog, and this is where I thank Foz and JT and all the people that have done video. For the last several years, we've got video of almost every Perl conference talk, at least for the North America ones, and they're all up on YouTube. So for those of you who maybe are a little bit new to the community and you think, oh wow, were there great talks? There are great talks, and go check them out. They're all up on YouTube, and we're going to continue to do that. You'll see that there'll be recording talks here at the conference, all up free for everyone to check out. So in summary, still kicking after 20 years in literally the fastest moving industry that the world has ever known. And that's not hyperbole. We all know that IT right now, things come and go very, very quickly. There are all sorts of fads with things, and I think that the staying power has been absolutely amazing. It's a very difficult industry to have that. And still 100% free and open for everyone on every platform. So I think that's fantastic. And that's for all of you. All right, so I was just told I got 5 minutes left, and this is actually what I was supposed to talk about, is the Perl Foundation stuff. So anyway, so what do we do with the Perl Foundation? So as I mentioned, we take in all the different donations so that we can support various things, and there's a whole bunch of other activities that we do. When you've been around for 20 years, and this is true probably all of you at the companies that you work at, there's things that you have to replace after a while. So one of the big things that we've been doing over the last couple of years is just revamping infrastructure. A lot of this stuff, as you can imagine, that we set up when we first set up, it was just coded. People just coded up new things because there weren't things. It's hard to imagine now with all the resources that are out there, but there were a lot of things that just didn't exist, so people made them. And we've been replacing a lot of those things. So TPF actually started in September of 2000. And one of the reasons actually that TPF got started was because of the early YAPCs. To have an event like this, one of the first criteria that the hosting organization is going to have is, do you have insurance? And that was a big lift to ask an organizer who was like, yeah, I'll volunteer my time. Like, oh, could you on your homeowner's policy, just, write that, add that on? Would that be too much of a problem? It turns out people balked at that for some reason. An entity was created to be able to hold that insurance, and then obviously many other things were added after that. Some of the documentation and other resources that we have, we've had them in various things over the years, and we've started to move those to GitHub. So we have like a GitHub organization, and people can jump in and help out with that. So we've been moving a lot of stuff there. We had some wikis and things like that were on previous Perl-based stuff. We moved those over. Perl.com, we talked about this last year, completely revamped. So if you've not checked it out in a while, it's all completely redone. New articles all the time, really fantastic. Redo. We redid the perlfoundation.org site. Again, this was kind of driven by an older system where there was kind of a wiki and you would put in content and it would get posted. And now we're on a new platform that's much easier for us to give out accounts and for people to update. So we moved that stuff over. And Neon is a platform that Dan actually found in his other role as treasurer, which is his other day job, or his other night job, I guess, compared to his other day job. And that just helps us with managing all the donations. So the very first incarnation of our donation management was homegrown, written Perl scripts. And then we went to another system, I think donor.com for a couple of years, and now we've moved on to Neon. And again, the resources now, there's so many other organizations doing kind of what we do now. They're so much better than the things that we had back when we built them. So it's just a matter of moving some of these things around. A lot of this stuff is not glamorous, but it has to be done, and it's the things that sort of help the Perl Foundation keep moving forward. The stuff we're working on right now for this year is a blog site update. So that when I say the blog site, this is the site at news.perlfoundation.org. So hopefully people go to that and check it out. This is where we announce all the stuff that we do, and typically a lot of posts about what are we doing with the money, which is pretty much what people want to know. But other things too. This is where we communicate everything. So It's on movable type, which is Perl-based, and it's been on sort of the same sort of older version of movable type for a long time, and I'm not going to make it. But this is something that we've been looking at, possible upgrades, like possibly upgrading movable type. But then a couple of years ago, we had somebody do a presentation on something called RapiBlog. I thought that would be cool. So Henry Van Stein, right here, gave that presentation, and somebody pointed me to it, and I actually missed it. I was at Washington, but I went and watched the video because we have videos, and I thought this would be great. So we're actually working on, we've got a demo site right now. Henry's already got that set up. We're testing it out. So that's hopefully going to be the next version of the blog site, and it'll be, again, 100% Perl, which is always fantastic to be able to use Perl tools. One of the big things we're working on right now, and one of the last things, the current site gets absolutely bombed with comment spam. You would not believe, like literally hundreds and hundreds of comment spam all the time. Like people, there's people that just go in and just clean that stuff out. So adding things like CAPTCHAs and things like that is something that we're working on just for our own preservation. So apologize in advance.
I'll do the CAPTCHA, I promise.
He's going to do the CAPTCHA. And I apologize in advance. Yes, there will be a CAPTCHA of some sort, but again, we just get absolutely hammered with the comment spam. And that's time that somebody can't do something else. Okay, other activities. Again, this is the other stuff that we support, conferences and workshops. General project grants, and that's the project one. So this is where any of you can submit an idea, and maybe you just need a little bit of funding to either encourage you to do it, or maybe there's just some cost or for your time. So these are the things that people do. You can see all those updates on the news site. There's a grants group. They look at all your stuff that comes in. If it gets approved, then once you complete your grant, you can get paid for it for your time. So that's pretty cool if you did not know about that. So that's something that we fund. There's also grants, long-running grants for Perl 5 and Perl 6 development. Now, all of this is still open source. There's still whole groups that contribute and work on all of these projects, Perl 5 and Perl 6. But there are a few folks that we have fund some of their time for like the really hard bugs, the things that people prioritize, maybe if there's a security issue, things like that. So we fund some of that. Less exciting things like trademark renewal, and you might say, well, you're open source, why do you need a trademark? And really, it's defensive. If we have a trademark, if we didn't have a trademark on Perl, someone else can go claim it and then claim to be Perl. So we've gone out as a Perl Foundation and defensively acquired the trademark in, I think, 4 different, the major areas where it's enforced. So US, Canada, EU, and Japan, I think. Dan's nodding. So those are the 4 that we've gone out and sort of gotten, and then those renewals come up. So we take care of stuff like that. We support the Unicode Consortium, so we're part of that. Again, watch news.perlfoundation.org if you just want to see like all the different stuff that we do. There's tons more than I can go through right here. So again, all of that stuff that we do, we're pretty much the money part of that, and it's thanks to the corporate donors, individual donors. We still get individual donations, which is fantastic. This is all of you sending us some money. And a really, really easy way that every single person in this room can donate and not cost you anything is smile.amazon.com. So if you use Amazon at all, the Smile site is a portion of Amazon where they'll take part of everything that you buy and they give it to some charity. So we are registered in there, as I mentioned, as yet another society. So if you go set up your Amazon account, set up yet another society, and then remember to go to Smile whenever you go to Amazon, we'll get a little bit at the end of the year. So that's an easy way that literally everybody could go and donate a little bit. Okay, last topic, I promise. Succession planning. So I don't know if everyone knows exactly what this term means, but basically it's a common idea. You can see it in governments, right? So we have a democratic government, someone's leaving, someone's coming. You do some planning to make sure there's some handoffs in there and make sure things go smoothly. Happens at companies. Everyone knows of people that, oh, if that person left, things would be really rough. So companies try to make sure that there's backups and things like that. So this is a common idea in government, common idea in companies, and it's also becoming a much more common idea in open source. There's all sorts of projects out there. Again, 20 years is also about the time frame of at least when the term open source was coined by Tim O'Reilly at some of the O'Reilly conferences. Obviously, free software was around for a while before that, but really you saw all the people getting in. 20 years is a long time for individuals to maintain code, projects, modules, things on CPAN. Right? So this is, people are starting to think about succession planning in terms of those projects as well. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why someone might need to step down from a project. It's not always voluntary, right? So you could have something like this can happen, which can be unfortunate. But sometimes people are just tired, right? And it's just time, like maybe, you know, it's time for me to step aside because I've done a lot of work and I just need some time off. There's happier scenarios, like winning the lottery, right? So, you know, maybe once you won the lottery, you know, some people might say, oh, I would do more open source, but, you know, maybe some people would want to take a break. And then there's just getting distracted, right? There might be something else that might be of interest to you and you want to go work on that. So you'd rather go work on that and you need to pass on whatever it is that you're doing to someone else. So, right, squirrel, get it? The dog, squirrel. Yeah, squirrel, thank you. All right, good. We think about this with TPF because it's just like an open source project. You need to have some continuity as you pass things through. So one of the things we've been doing over the past couple of years is continuing to add people to the board. Dave Brolsky, I think, is the most recent for this last year. So thank you, Dave. Some of the other longtime board members have expressed interest in one of those options above, maybe not the bus thing, but maybe some of the others, you know, being tired or moving on. I don't know that any of them have won the lottery, at least not that they told me. But so we've continued to add more board members so that people can kind of smoothly move off, but we still have continuity, right? And that's the key part of it. Some other key roles that this year we will also be transitioning. Me is one of the ones that's going to be transitioning out. So we have been working for quite a while, many months, on finding candidates for president. There are special requirements for this role that are a little bit different from the board, but we think we have a really good candidate, and I should be posting details later today or tomorrow about who that candidate is. And as we've done with, if people haven't seen it on the news.perlfoundation.org site, we do a period of public comment now to allow people. We're not like a voting organization, so it's not like we put it out for a vote, but we do allow people to sort of comment on people before the board just goes and votes, because I think previously it felt very much like we were kind of that secret society, and we would just post like, hey, this new person came up, and people were kind of surprised by it. So I'll be posting that later. And we are also looking for a new treasurer. As I mentioned, that's Dan's other, not day job, and he's also been in that role for a long time, and so we've been talking about that also for a couple of months as to how to transition that. These are probably the two most active roles in TPF, so they're important ones, and so to the point of succession planning, Dan and I have both committed to help out the new person. We're not going to disappear. We're going to sort of shadow these people, probably for a year. That may sound a little bit crazy, but there's certain things that only happen on a yearly cycle, so we kind of want to be around so that whatever those things are, when they come up, we can kind of be like, oh, this is how we've done it in the past. So yeah. And then the most important, how can you help? Because this is what you're all thinking, right? Like, oh, wow, that's all great. You guys are doing all this stuff, but me, how can I get involved? How can I help, right? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Perl Foundation site webmaster, as I mentioned, we moved it over to like a WYSIWYG platform. It's super easy. You do not need to be a coder. And this would just be somebody to just help clean up stuff on the site. We did move it all over, but it still needs lots of cleanup. Plus, we want to help people, different editors. There's people who get in and they only edit like once in a while. So if there was like a resource they could go to and get help on that stuff, that would be a huge help. Once we get the blog up, I'm assuming like it would be helpful to have an admin to do things like accounts and stuff like that. So maybe it could be the same role or maybe not. Conference organizer, Lena mentioned this, is that there's a group that really works all year round on this. That's a great way. If you have fun at this conference and you see kind of the people running around, or you just think these swank t-shirts are something that you would like to add to your collection, then think about being a conference organizer. It starts off slowly as far as after this year, before next year sort of ramps up. There's a Slack group, so you can just get involved. There's discussion there. So it's a pretty easy ramp up as far as something you might want to participate in. And then obviously as the conference comes closer, there's calls, Zoom calls and things like that, and the activity increases. But that's a great way. Many people have gotten involved this way. That's how I got started, was working through conferences. Grants Committee, as I mentioned, there's two roles in the Grants Committee. There's the Grants Committee members, and they just vote on all of your submissions. And then there's also Grant Manager, and they're the people who watch the grants and then basically decide when they've been completed so that we should pay it out. So super important roles. So there's openings right now. They also have some people who are stepping down. So if you're interested in the grants program, you can step forward and do that. Simplest thing you could possibly do, write an article for Perl.com. It's all a really cool automated system through GitHub where you just do like a pull request and send it in. So if there's a really cool talk that you go to while you're here, or if you're giving a talk and after you kind of recover from all the time doing your slides, write up an article sort of short version of your talk. Everybody in this room could contribute an article for Perl.com. So kind of helps you, something that you can point at from your resume that you did this. And also it helps Perl.com because we'd like to see new faces on there. There's a lot of the contributors are folks that contribute a lot. So everybody can do that. TPF marketing, this is another role. This is like the social media stuff, helping us out with Twitter and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So if anybody sort of has those talents or is interested. And the other thing, this is the lowest bar of everything that, something that everyone here can do is just do some social media about your experience here at the conference, right? So tweet would probably be the lowest bar, the very simplest thing that you could do. But if you do Facebook, whatever the social media is that you do, as Dan mentioned, the hashtag, it's a little bit challenging. It's not TCPIP. I've made that mistake several times already. But it's close to that. But please do this. Take some time to do this because this is just a huge way that it helps just get more positive sort of Perl information out there in the community. And I promise I'm almost done. So just a few suggestions before you go off and start to enjoy the formal conference. Learn something new. I always do when I come here. I've come to many of these conferences and you think, what could possibly be new about Perl? And every time I come, there's something new and also something completely relevant for something I'm working on. So this year, I started to play around with some WebSockets. And I wanted to do it with Perl, obviously, so I go look at the schedule, and there's a talk on WebSockets and Perl. So it's always, TPC is always right there when I need it. So I encourage everybody, hopefully learn something new. Meet some new people. One of the people at the Alt dinner last night, I think, won, at least provisionally, the award for best socializing. He walked around the table and introduced himself to every single person. I thought that was absolutely fantastic. So meet some new people. Dan said there's a mixer later, so we try to help facilitate this, the badges and that whole thing. So meet some new people. Have fun. So hopefully this one is super easy and you don't actually have to try at it. And the last one is just be inspired. I've walked out of these with new energy every year. I'm always inspired by the different projects, the different things that people work on. And the reality distortion field is not always a force for evil. A lot of things, a lot of projects have been launched from within the reality distortion field. And that's basically the people get crazy at conferences and start talking about things that they would never do when they were in their right state of mind. But some great things have been inspired by that. So don't let that be a force for good. Have a great conference. That's all for me. Thanks.